Welcome to the Dental Decoders podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Rogars, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Hello, Decoders, and thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Dental Decoders podcast. I'm super excited because we are going to be joined this week by our guest co-host, Rebecca Herring, and Wendy Aldhamen. She is the dental recruiter extraordinaire. She is one of the very few recruiters out there who is dental specific and only focuses in the dental industry. So that is fantastic. In this conversation, we really kind of dive into all areas of hiring, what offices are typically doing wrong, what some offices are doing right, ways that you can improve the hiring inside your practice, and just some key takeaways and tips on how to kind of bridge this gap. As we've all heard the statistics, and if you haven't, buckle up because it's a scary one, that we're going to lose like a third of our dental professionals over the next few years. We need like 150,000 new dental team members in order to fill this gap. So to try and combat all of that, we've got some cool tips in this episode that will help you with that. But before we dig into the episode, I want to just tell you a little bit about Wendy. If you have not heard of her, she is truly just an amazing spirit. And every time I get on a call with her, I feel her energy. So it makes me feel fantastic every time I get on a call with her. But a little bit about her. Wendy has been a hiring manager since 2014, so 10 years now. She started her dental coaching career in the trenches. She kind of began as like a dental assistant in 2010, where she found that her office culture was toxic and wasn't bringing her the joy that she wants in life. A lot of us can relate to that. After that, she went to work at her dream practice. And as she progressed through the ranks and was receptionist and office manager, she gained all this insight into office culture and the importance of an actual good fit for your practice. She also learned how to become a leader and how truly effective communication in business is crucial to the success. So she started her business, which is Career Elevation, to fill a void in the dental business. She now matches trained dental employees with enjoyable workplaces so it can be a mutual beneficial experience. I'm going to put her links in the show notes. If you're not already, I strongly recommend you checking her out on social media. Even if you're not ready to use a recruiter now, she drops so much knowledge on her social media channels and in this episode. I can't wait for you to check it out. Good morning and welcome to Dental Decoders podcast. Wendy, I'm so excited to have you here, and we get to be joined by our guest co-host, Rebecca. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. It's a great day. Great morning already.
Exactly. Anytime we all get to spend the morning together, I think is a great morning.
Absolutely.
Always.
So, Wendy, I would love if you would start by telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do and why we thought you'd be a great person to have on Dental Decoders podcast.
All right. That sounds great. So I am Wendy Aldhamen, and I love dentistry. I love recruiting. I love getting people into the right position, into the right seat. I own Career Elevation, and we do dental specific recruiting for anybody within an office. If that is an associate, an assistant, an office manager, a virtual assistant, I can hire anybody, even outside of a dental office as well. So that's what I do, and why is because of my passion for dentistry. I had been in an office that I didn't really want to be in, and I was hoping to be able to allow people a fluid, easy transition into a better office. And that's kind of my goal, is to get people into offices they actually enjoy, and not just an office that they have to live in.
I really love that. I would love to hear your perspective, because a lot of people think recruiter, and why would they use a recruiter for a dental practice, right? Because they think like big jobs, like I won't mention any names, but like a big job, right? Like in tech usually, right? So tell us some of your like pros and cons in that sense of why would a dental practice would want to use a recruiter versus just using some of the standard methods, right? Indeed, and some of those sites to find someone.
Well, the major thing that I hear from the offices that I talk with is that it saves them so much time. They know that we're on Indeed every day. We're posting their jobs every single day. It's a task that takes a lot of time that they don't then have to do. And that we're asking each candidate the exact same questions, where we feel that we have to kind of ask these questions. We obviously will sprinkle in some additional questions if it makes sense, but we ask these questions so that every single person gets the same questions asked to them. Because I've talked to many office managers and they're like, I don't know why I can't hire a good person. And I'm like, well, how chatty are you in the interview? And are you actually following questions? Because if you're not actually following questions, that's not actually helpful, because you're getting to know them. You're getting, like, you like their personality, but you might not actually get the opportunity to ask what are the duties that you do within the practice and actually kind of understand that. So a time saving is a huge thing, and being able to have everything super organized. We have too many checklists, to be honest, on our end, because we don't let people fall through the cracks. And that's another thing that we hear from a lot of candidates is, I've been interviewing for a while and I haven't heard back from a lot of offices. I just wanted to make sure, even if it was a no, that I was going to hear back. And we're like, absolutely. Even if it's a no, we're still going to tell you. If we've had a phone call with you, any kind of communication in that way, absolutely, we will make sure to let you know. And so that's a good reflection on the office as well. So that in the future, if you get into dentistry, you've been in dental, if somebody ghosted you at a dental office, you might tell your friends and be like, hey, just to let you know, they're not very good. I don't really like them. It was rude. And so another kind of plus for them that we're kind of checking all these boxes. I don't want to tell you any negatives about hiring a recruiter.
Because there aren't any.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted you to say, Wendy, is there's none.
There you go. I mean, I will say, though, that you can do all of the same things that I can do, to be 100% truthful. However, this is what we do all day, every day. And so we understand like the rhythms and understand kind of the process of how we're supposed to do things. And we understand all of the algorithms and the backstory behind Indeed, where it's not like, a layman's person. Anytime I do a sales call, too, with an office, if I see their ad on Indeed, I'll be like, okay, so this is why it's not that great, in a very gentle way, of course, but it's saying like, this is also why you're not getting any leads to your hygiene position, because it's reflecting as medical, and here's why, and this is how you can take it off. And so just, there's a lot of office managers, dentists, whoever's posting the job, they don't necessarily know the ins and outs of Indeed like we do. So
that's something I would have never thought about as someone who's posted on Indeed myself before, in a practice and outside of the practice. I'm like, why do I get all of these medical people? That makes a lot of sense. Algorithms are going to be the death of me across all social media forms, I think.
I get it.
So, Wendy, I've got kind of a two-part question. First part is, when I'm looking to use a recruiter to hire a position, is that specifically for when I'm looking for someone with dental experience? Is that when it's most beneficial to use that? Or can you find the right candidate for the role even if they don't have dental experience? And if I'm working with a recruiter, what does that process even look like? As someone who I have not worked with a recruiter before, I'd love to hear more about what that looks like.
So we can find somebody with experience or without experience. I went to Chicago Midwinter, and one of the speakers said that over the next 5 years, we're going to lose, I think a third of all of dental people, maybe that don't hold licenses, in the next 5 years. So being able to pull from outside of dentistry, and Rebecca, I know you help with, at least tell me if I'm wrong, you help with SOPs as well. Yeah?
I do.
So that's another reason why, helping with SOPs, and that's something I'm launching in the next few months as well, is to be able to bring people in that don't have dentistry, because the pool is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And what are we doing to help ourselves in that manner? But of course, there are some positions that you have to have licenses, and what can we do to be able to get to that, things like that. So yes, I can help with experience and without experience. And then to work with a recruiter, I ask an invasive amount of questions, probably, but usually at the end, I will always ask, do you feel that I have an accurate understanding and depiction of your practice, so that I can go out and find the right person for you, or at least close enough to the right person for you. And very rarely does anybody say, I have something to add because I ask so many questions. But we want to get the best quality people to you, and people who understand about your practice, candidates who feel comfortable that we've answered all the questions for them so that they are a very hot lead by the time they get to the office, versus just like I asked, what do they do? And I asked about the candidate, but I didn't tell them about the office. So we tell them all about the office so they know and understand. And so for the process, we post everything on Indeed through our platform, through our company page. We do the phone interviews, we do Zoom interviews, we transcribe both, we record the Zoom, we send it to you. So once we're like basically towards the end of that candidate, we send the Zoom to the office, and you get the opportunity to see it. And does this person's personality, do we think that this could work in our practice? And then if you want to do a working interview or a meet and greet or whatever that looks like, every office is slightly different in like how they want to meet with the individual. But we do help and coach the offices along the way too. Do you want to do a working interview? If they don't have experience, it doesn't make sense. They can just do a shadow day and you don't have to pay them for it, and explain to them the differences between skills assessment and working interview and shadow and all of that stuff too.
I love that process that you do. I've gone through the recruitment process, someone who had reached out as a recruiter for a position several years ago. And I appreciated the process because it was so detailed. I don't think that offices are as thorough when they do hire somebody. I believe in that saying where it says, be slow to hire, fast to fire.
Yeah.
And I think that for both the office and whoever it is that you're recruiting for, and the candidate, it's key, I think, to give a very broad, very thorough understanding of the position, the office, what their environment's like, what are they looking for. Because I think that sometimes our ads are just very broad because we are really struggling to find staff members at this time. And I think we'll say, just anyone apply. Please, anyone, just apply. And please, I like anyone. Please come to my office. But what I appreciate about a recruiter is, like you said, they do a really deep dive into the person themselves, but also the office, really know what you want. So I really enjoy working with recruiters for that reason. Save me a ton of time. I don't want to do all the digging part, but then the recruiter really knows what you're looking for, and they won't send you anyone unless, like you said, they are rock stars and they're really going to fit your practice.
Yeah, and another thing that I didn't mention earlier too is that we have a positive and a negative for each candidate. But even though it's a negative for us, like for example, I did an interview, I think yesterday or a Friday, and I said, they had said, we don't want a D personality. That's not somebody who would fit in here. And so I put in the negative, you determine if you think that her personality is a D. She's kind of on the cusp. She might be a D, but she just might be a strong personality. But could she fit into your practice? And so it was a negative, but also it's like you evaluate, because it's a little bit on the cusp. And I think that's another positive too, is that we have kind of an outside objective to find, the positives and negatives in general. Because if you are talking for 45 minutes to the person and you really connect with them, then you're like, okay, here's all the positives. But we are like, okay, but what are the negatives? Like what's actually like quote unquote wrong with this person for this role or for this office? And so it's another plus, I think, working with a recruiter.
I'm curious, as a recruiter, I've never thought about this till you just mentioned that D personality. Do you guys, if the office wants, would you offer or perform like the DISC assessments or those types of things if the office wanted it?
So we had been doing that in the past, and then I was listening to a webinar, and it was about an HR person hosting it, and she was like, there could be issues with that. So there are, for example, a lot of people don't know that in like about half of the states, you're not allowed to look up and discriminate against someone's social media presence. I know Brittany's
never done that before.
We all do it. Just admit it, everybody.
Well, you just don't tell me, and that's not the reason why you are denying somebody, and I have no idea. But just kidding, of course. We don't want to break any laws. But so that's one of the things that it sounds like is going to be coming through the pipelines if it's not already in some states. And so I've told offices that's not something that I feel comfortable doing. I wouldn't want to get you or me into any legal issues. And so I'm going to let you know ahead of time that you can evaluate their personality in your head. And if you don't think that the personality is going to work, then that is what it is. But, that's something that's kind of on the cusp of probably a no-no, probably coming out pretty soon.
Can someone in reverse come to you? So if I was an office manager and I was looking for a new role and maybe wanted to be either discreet about it or wanted someone to help me find like my perfect practice. I think you mentioned this at the beginning. Does this work the same way? Like an office can come to you to recruit somebody, but can someone come to you as an individual and recruit for them to find their perfect practice?
That we don't do a ton of. We'll do it with hygiene and with associates because those positions are a little bit harder. But we have found in the past trying to do this with people who have reached out that it just becomes a little bit hard. So like if an assistant says, hey, I want a position and I don't have a job opening in their area, then I will, say, here's some tips and tricks, or this is what you can do for your resume. But I probably can't really place you into an office. But for hygiene and for associates, absolutely, I'm happy to do so. There are some markets that there are the offices, like I live in Michigan, in the Metro Detroit area. Nobody wants to pay to find a dentist because there's 2 dental schools, and they're like, we can find our own. And I'm like, you can, but this person has 10 years of experience. They speak 2 languages. They want to do, general dentistry and implants and oral surgery, and they want to do everything. And, it's a little bit harder to find somebody with 10 years of experience. So yeah, there's pockets everywhere throughout the nation as we're nationwide. So
can I ask, it was triggered by something that we were saying earlier, so I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. Sorry, guys. What is one thing that you see that offices are commonly doing wrong when it comes to recruiting themselves, other than not hiring a recruiter?
That was a great little plug. That's not where my brain was going.
I got you.
Creating their job ad that they post so that the candidate actually wants to read it. There's so many people who have like ADD or ADHD or they just don't our brains only have so much attention span these days, right? And if you're making a post, like the sales call that I did last night, he had like 30 or 40 bullet points. And I'm like, my brain can't even scan through it. The only thing that you can really scan through is what the hours are. You can't really scan through anything else. So it's not user friendly, not reader friendly. It doesn't tell me the hours that I would be working. It doesn't tell me anything about the office. It doesn't tell me anything about the benefits. And so really it's just like, here's a list of stuff that a hygienist is supposed to do, but the majority of offices, hygiene does mostly the same things. You don't really need that checklist, but rather, why should somebody actually work at your practice? I call them hookers. My first 3 sentences in my ads are like hook questions to bring somebody in, to draw somebody in, to say, this is why you should work here. This is why people love working here, things like that. And so people are just creating ads like, I need to get this job posted, and they're just trying to do it as fast as they can, but they're not really thinking of almost like the consequences, if you will. They're not thinking long term of what it's going to look like. And then also like they're not clicking on the right buttons on Indeed. They're not looking back to see what it actually looks like for the candidate. The company profile, there's nothing there. There's no website attached. There's no nothing. And so this candidate is like, okay, well, if I'm a hygienist, for example, I have 150 jobs to look through. I want to look and find jobs that are appealing. Yeah. That have good reviews on Indeed, that I don't have to go elsewhere in order to find out information about the office. I can find it all here on Indeed and, get as much information as I can there. So I think that that's where a lot of people kind of go wrong, is they really should be building out whatever platform they're using, build it out to its maximum capacity, and showcase why should somebody actually work for you versus here's a position, come on over.
What do you think about, and this is something that this is a personal question. I just want to know the answer. I've been with growth and expansion. We've been talking about doing a careers page or like a hiring page on our website where our team is talking about what makes us special and what it takes to work here. What do you think about implementing something like that in a dental office? I know it's not quite as common in our industry, but it is in a lot of other industries. Do you think something like that is beneficial to an office who's looking to hire, especially those harder to fill roles like hygiene and associates?
That's a good question. So I think it also depends too on how genuine that it sounds, because sometimes it will just sound like somebody created it where it's not actually legitimate. And we ask the question to all of our candidates, why did you choose dentistry? Why do you think that you wanted to be in someone's mouth all day? Right? Why do you want someone to say, I hate going to the dentist every day? Why do you want to interact with those people? Where there's always a kind of like a passion, and a lot of times it's a lot of the same reasons or same answers. And so maybe rather than having it listed under every single position's name, that you could have another section that says, here's 3 different people with different reasons of why they love the dentist or love working at the dental office, and say like, maybe I had a fear when I was a kid and I decided to conquer my fears, and this is something that it really turned into a passion. That was me, Kate. And also something along the lines of, I really enjoy helping patients kind of have a different mindset about the dentist, or I love creating smiles, or whatever that looks like. So if you have a lot of people's answers within the practice that's the same, then just pick like 3 or 4 different answers and then put their name next to it, their position, and maybe their face if you want to. That could be an excellent idea. I don't see that ever, to be honest. And if I do see that, it's because it's not an office that wants to work with me because they already have good connections within the dental community. And that's something that I'm trying to create more of, is better cultures within an office. And how do you do that? How do you make it so back like 10 years ago when I was in dental practices, I remember thinking, man, if I could just get into that dental office, it would be amazing. I would love it. I've heard nothing but good things. And I feel like there's no such thing anymore. I feel like those offices have just completely like disappeared. And those are the offices that I'm trying to recreate through this masterclass that I'm working through and working on creating, and it'll be released here shortly. So that offices don't necessarily have to work so hard for recruiting anymore, that it's just kind of a natural flow. People want to work in their practice, and just an easier flow.
I really like that. That would be cool. So I have a question too, and this, I guess I'll say, is personally, I just want to know too, but I think our readers or our listeners do too. How would an office find a recruiter? I mean, but just in general, right? If they were just looking for one, how does someone find a recruiter?
I had that question yesterday from a dentist that I was talking with, that I was interviewing. And he's like, I wanted to talk to a recruiter because I don't know what questions I'm allowed to ask anymore. He's been in the field for like 35 years. He's like, I don't even know if I'm allowed to ask these questions or if it's going to completely turn somebody off. Because back in the day, it could turn somebody off, and then the office can be like, I don't ever want to talk to you again. But you have to ask it kind of in a certain way. So going back, what was your question? Well, how do people find you?
Wendy, I want to know how people find you.
Okay, got it. You turn over every single rock until you find a good recruiter. So,
well, it's not like you go into Google and you type, I need to find a dental recruiter.
You can, but there's not very many dental specific recruiters, where we're only in the dental field. I would suggest, if you didn't want to work with me, because I know that I'm not right for everybody and not everybody is right for me, but if you did want that, then post in a Facebook group or post on LinkedIn or something like that, and ask your fellow colleagues who has worked with another recruiter. Ask any of your dental friends, or if you know of a a dental group and they have an HR section, ask if their HR person knows of any recruiters, because a lot of times that kind of goes hand in hand, HR and recruiting and things. So that's where I would go. Other than, of course, I'm sure that you guys are going to add my information into the show notes. So feel free to contact me. I'm here for you.
We will get your info out to everyone.
Yeah.
And then let them know that they found you through Dental Decoders podcast.
That's it.
That's amazing. As we kind of wrap up today with you, Wendy, always a joy chatting with you. I have worked with you, as you know, and Brittany, Wendy is our girl for sure.
Perfect.
Wendy, if you could share with our listeners today, what would you say is some of your, I'll give you, a couple, because you're a recruiter, so you might have a few you have to share with us today. What are some of your decoding moments in your life that have kind of pushed you towards dentistry, or you'd like to share with our listeners?
Right. So I wrote this down because I knew I was going to forget, because like in a podcast, you're just like, your brain is not there. So Rebecca, you had mentioned earlier the saying, and this is kind of what I wrote down so that I didn't forget kind of how I wanted to word it. So you said slow to hire and fast to fire. So my kind of flip on that is hire before you need somebody, and then you fire fast if they're not the right person for your practice. So even before I was full-time working in Career Elevation, I had an employee. I think it's incredibly important because there's so many things that you're doing the same thing every single day. You don't have to be the only one to do it. You can train somebody else to do it. They can do a lot of the things on your behalf. And so I was so thankful that I hired her. She's still with me today. She's absolutely wonderful. Yay. And so hire before you need somebody, train them, because then if they're not the right person, hopefully you still have a little bit of time to find another hire if that's not the right person. And I say fire fast because what's the purpose of leaving somebody in the practice? Because, we'll give them 6 months. That's a long time. If they don't seem like they're good within the first 30 to 60 days, 90 days max, in my opinion, then just let them go. Like, you should have some kind of a plan, some kind of an SOP, if you will, of like where you want them to be depending on their level of experience. And so I think that there's just kind of like a lot that speaks to that, and hiring before you need them, but also keeping track of the process of the fact that you do need them. And like if it's an associate dentist, sometimes that's a little bit hard, but can you bring them on part-time and then wean them into full-time, things like that. So it's different for every position, but just be very aware and cognizant of hiring each individual.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I also wrote down to hire slow, fire fast. So I love that we both took the same note on that. So I'm going to tweak mine now a little bit. Good. Thank you so much, Wendy, for jumping on the show with us. The moment we connected on our first phone call, I was like, okay, this girl's going to be great. I'm going to love her. So I'm super glad that you were able to make time to come on the show. Rebecca, as always, thanks for jumping on with us too. This has been such a great conversation, and I appreciate you ladies both so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.